Hey everyone, I don't usually write stuff like this, but I've been thinking a lot about my life lately. Some people only know me as Alexander the Great, but I wasn't always great. At one point, I was just a kid with messy hair, a curious mind, and a father who was both my biggest teacher and my biggest shadow. My father, King Philip of Macedon, was a giant in every sense. Strong, clever, ruthless. He built an army that could crush anyone in our path. People respected him. Some feared him. And me? I was just his son, trying to prove I wasn't soft. When I was little, my tutor was a man named Aristotle. Yeah, that Aristotle, the philosopher. Imagine being a teenager and your teacher is the guy who literally knows everything about science, philosophy, politics, and the world. I'd ask him questions about the stars, about animals, about the meaning of life, and he always gave me answers that made me hungry for more. He planted this fire in me. The idea that life shouldn't just be about ruling one kingdom. It should be about seeing everything. But here's the twist. As much as I loved learning, my father thought I wasn't ready to lead. He treated me like a child. Soldiers in camp whispered that Philip was the true lion, and I was just his cub. I can't explain how much that burned inside me. Every time I heard it, I swore I'd prove them wrong. The first time I truly felt like I had something special was with a horse named Bucephalus. Everyone thought he was wild and dangerous, impossible to tame. My father laughed when I asked if I could try, but I noticed something others missed. Bucephalus was afraid of his own shadow. I turned him toward the sun so he couldn't see it, and suddenly, he calmed down. I climbed on, and just like that, he was mine. My father was shocked. He even said, "Son, find a kingdom big enough, because Macedonia isn't enough for you." That was the first time he admitted I might be destined for something greater. At that moment, I felt proud, but I had no idea how quickly pride can turn to betrayal. So yeah, for a while after the horse thing, I felt unstoppable. I trained with the army, rode into battles beside my father, and started to think, maybe I really am meant for more. But life has a way of reminding you how small you actually are. See, my father remarried. That shouldn't have been a big deal, right? Kings marry all the time. But this time, it was different. He married a Macedonian woman named Cleopatra. Not the Cleopatra you're probably thinking of, another one. The problem was, she was pure Macedonian. And people started whispering that any son she gave him would be more legitimate than me, because my mom, Olympias, came from Epirus, a different kingdom. At the wedding feast, one of my father's generals got drunk and basically said out loud, "Now Philip can have a real heir." Imagine being me, sitting there, everyone laughing, eyes darting toward me like I wasn't good enough. I snapped. I yelled at the guy, and even at my father. And you know what Philip did? He stood up, drunk, angry, and pulled out his sword. My own father came at me. He was so drunk he tripped and fell, but the damage was done. The king of Macedonia tried to kill his own son in front of everyone. That night, I packed my things and left the palace. My mother came with me, both of us furious and humiliated. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd done, after all the training, after proving myself with Bucephalus and in battle, my father was ready to throw me aside. It felt like betrayal in the deepest way, not from an enemy, but from the man whose approval I craved the most. For weeks, I burned with anger. Part of me wanted to ride away forever, start my own life somewhere else. But another part whispered, "Wait. Watch. Your time is coming." And oh, it came faster than I ever expected. I didn't have to wait long. Not even a year later, my father Philip was celebrating another victory. The man couldn't lose. He was planning to lead a massive army against Persia, the richest empire in the world. Everyone was drinking, feasting, making plans for glory. And then it happened. Right there, in front of the crowd, one of his bodyguards rushed forward and stabbed him. My father, the king who thought he was untouchable, collapsed in blood. Chaos exploded around me. People screaming, soldiers pulling out swords, nobles running in every direction. And me? I just stood frozen, watching. My father, the man I loved, hated, admired, and feared, was gone in seconds. Now here's where things get messy. Everyone had theories. Some said my mother, Olympias, arranged it. She hated Philip for humiliating her. Others whispered that I knew about it. I didn't. I swear I didn't. But I'd be lying if I said part of me didn't feel conflicted. Shock, anger, sadness. All mixed with this cold realization. This is my chance. The generals needed a leader, and fast. If I hesitated, I'd lose everything. Rivals would step in, maybe even try to kill me. I was only 20 years old, but I had to decide in that moment. Was I going to be a scared boy, or was I going to take the throne? I chose the throne. That night, I didn't sleep. My heart was heavy, but my mind was sharp. I swore to myself, I will not let my father's death be the end of our story. It will be the beginning of mine. But I had no idea how many betrayals still lay ahead. Taking the throne at 20 sounds exciting, right? Like some dream come true. But the reality? It was a nightmare. The second my father's body hit the ground, everyone around me started calculating how to use me, replace me, or kill me. Some of the nobles pretended to be on my side. They smiled, bowed, called me king. But behind the curtains, they were already plotting. A few of Philip's old allies thought I was too young, too soft. They whispered about putting someone else on the throne, maybe even my half-brother, and my so-called friends. Some of them vanished the moment things got dangerous. Guys who once drank with me, rode with me, swore they'd fight beside me. Suddenly they were gone, hiding, waiting to see who came out on top. That cut deeper than I expected. I thought loyalty meant something, but I learned fast. Loyalty in politics is as thin as smoke. I had to act quickly. My mother, Olympias, whispered poison in my ear every night. She told me who was plotting, who might betray me, who needed to be removed. She was intense, sometimes terrifying, but she wasn't wrong. So I made my first hard choice as king. I ordered executions. Men I grew up watching in the palace, gone. My rivals, eliminated. The people saw a 20-year-old, but I made sure they also saw steel in my eyes. Still, when I lay awake at night, I felt hollow. I kept asking myself, is this what power feels like? Sitting on a throne made of other people's bones. But I couldn't stop, because if I hesitated, I'd be the one bleeding on the floor, just like my father. And in the middle of all this chaos, one unexpected opportunity came knocking. Persia. After the blood and betrayals at home, I realized something. If I only sat on my throne in Macedonia, I'd always be looking over my shoulder. Rivals, assassins, jealous nobles, they'd never stop coming. I needed something bigger, something that would unite everyone under me. That something was Persia. My father had been planning that campaign before he was killed, and I decided to finish what he started. Persia was the biggest empire the world had ever seen. Massive cities, endless gold, armies larger than anything we could imagine. Everyone thought I was crazy. I was just a 20-year-old kid, barely holding my own throne, and now I was saying, let's conquer Persia. But here's the thing. I needed to. It wasn't just about glory. It was survival. If I led the army into Persia, my people would be too busy fighting enemies abroad to fight me at home. Betrayal would shift from behind my back to face on the battlefield, and I preferred it that way. Still, some of my generals didn't trust me. They thought I was too ambitious, too reckless. One of them even said, "You're leading us into suicide." That stung, because these were the men who were supposed to be my second fathers, guiding me. Instead, they doubted me. I'll be honest, I was angry. I felt like I had to prove myself again. But anger is fuel, and I told them straight. I'd rather die chasing greatness than live small and afraid. Some of them smirked, like I was a foolish boy. Others nodded, quietly impressed. But none of them knew yet what I was truly capable of. So we set sail across the Hellespont, leaving Macedonia behind. I was terrified but also alive in a way I'd never felt before. Ahead of me was the most powerful empire on earth. And deep down, I wondered, would Persia destroy me, or would I destroy it? Crossing into Persia felt like stepping into another world. Their empire was huge, cities full of gold, markets buzzing with spices, people speaking languages I'd never even heard before. And then there was their army. Enormous. Terrifying. If I messed up once, I was finished. Our first real test came at the Granicus River. Picture this. Their cavalry lined up on the far side. Thousands of glittering helmets catching the sun. I looked across the water and felt my stomach twist. Part of me thought, am I insane? I was asking my men to charge straight into a river, uphill, against the most powerful empire in the world. but I couldn't show fear. So I gave the order. We charged. The water splashed up around us. Arrows rained down. Horses screamed. At one point, a Persian noble swung his sword right at me. I swear I felt the air cut across my face. Another would have finished me if Clytus, one of my officers, hadn't cut him down at the last second. That moment stuck with me. I realized how fragile I really was, how easily I could have died and been remembered as the foolish boy who tried to be great. But somehow we won. Against all odds, we broke them. I remember standing on the riverbank afterward, soaked, covered in mud and blood, staring at the Persian dead. Part of me felt invincible. Part of me just felt numb. And then came the betrayal. Some of the Greek soldiers who had been fighting with the Persians, mercenaries, men from my own culture, fell into our hands. My generals wanted to spare them, but I couldn't. To me, they weren't just enemies. They were traitors. Greeks, fighting for Persia against their own people. I made the hardest decision yet. I ordered them executed. Thousands of men. Just like that. My stomach turned when I gave the command, but I told myself it had to be done. Loyalty had to mean something. If I let betrayal slide, what message would that send? That night, I lay awake staring at the stars, wondering if I was becoming like my father, cold, ruthless, unforgiving. Was I building greatness, or was I just repeating his mistakes? Either way, there was no turning back. Persia was only beginning to fight. After Granicus, word spread fast. The young Macedonian king had beaten Persia's armies in open battle. You'd think that would make me feel safe, but honestly, it only made me more paranoid. The Persians weren't done, and neither were the snakes hiding in my own camp. Our next clash was at Issus, where we finally faced Darius himself, the king of kings. His army was massive, stretching across the plains like a sea of shields. My men were terrified. Some whispered that we should retreat. I'll admit it, for a split second, I thought the same. But retreat meant death. The Persians would hunt us down like dogs. So I rode out in front of my men and shouted that we would win or die with honor. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they could hear it through my armor. But somehow, the words worked. The soldiers roared, and we charged. The battle was chaos. Horses crashing into each other, spears breaking, men screaming. At one point, I saw Darius himself in his chariot. For a second, our eyes locked. He panicked. He turned and ran. The king of kings fled, leaving his army to crumble. When the dust cleared, we had won. My men lifted me on their shoulders, shouting my name. I should have felt unstoppable. But then I saw what Darius had left behind. His own family. His wife, his mother, his daughters. They sat in their tents, terrified, expecting the worst. And here's where people expected me to be cruel. To treat them as spoils of war. Instead, I showed them respect. I swore no harm would come to them. That shocked everyone, even my own generals. Some of them grumbled that I was being weak, that I should have used them as bargaining chips. That's when I realized, betrayal doesn't always come with a sword. Sometimes it comes as whispers, doubts, men questioning your choices when you're trying to do what feels right. I started to notice it more. A hesitation in their eyes when I gave orders. Quiet conversations that stopped when I entered the tent. My own officers, men I trusted, were beginning to wonder if I was leading them toward glory or madness. And deep down, I wondered the same. Victory at Issus should have united us. We had humiliated the mighty Darius, captured his family, and proven ourselves against impossible odds. But instead of peace, cracks started to spread through my inner circle. The first betrayal came quietly. A few of my officers, men I had eaten with, laughed with, called brothers, were caught sending secret messages back to Macedonia. They weren't planning to overthrow me directly, but they were plotting to secure their own power in case I failed. In other words, they were already preparing for my death. When I found out, my chest felt hollow. These weren't strangers. These were men who had bled beside me at Granicus, men I'd trusted with my life. Now I had to order their executions. Watching them dragged away, I felt like I was cutting pieces out of my own heart. But the worst betrayal came from someone even closer, Parmenian's family. Parmenian was my father's old general, one of the few men who had stood by me since the beginning. He was like a second father to me. But rumors started swirling that his son, Philotas, had been speaking against me, maybe even plotting an assassination. At first, I didn't believe it. How could I? But then evidence piled up. Too many whispers. Too many coincidences. Finally, I confronted Philotas, and his answers only made him look guiltier. My counsel urged me to act. If I hesitated, I'd look weak. So I gave the order. Philotas was executed. And Parmenion, the man who had been like family to me, I had him killed too, just in case he sought revenge. I'll never forget the weight of that choice. I sat alone in my tent that night, staring at my hands, wondering if they'd ever be clean again. That was when I realized something terrifying. Every mile I marched east, every victory I claimed, the circle of people I could trust grew smaller. Power was supposed to make me strong, but it was also making me very, very alone. After Parmenion and his son, I thought the worst of the betrayals were behind me. But the truth? That was just the beginning. We marched deeper into Persia, across deserts that seemed endless. The sun burned our skin, food was scarce, men collapsed from thirst. Every time someone fell, I heard whispers. Alexander is pushing us too far. He doesn't care if we die. And maybe they were right. I told myself it was necessary. That greatness demanded sacrifice. But at night, lying awake in the sand, I started to wonder if I was leading them to glory or leading them into the grave. The loneliness gnawed at me. My friends were still there, but they felt more like shadows than brothers. Even Hephaestion, the one man who truly understood me, couldn't always silence the doubts creeping into my mind. I started drinking more, holding longer feasts, trying to drown the emptiness. That's when mistakes happened. One night, one of my closest officers, Clitus, the same man who once saved my life at Granicus, got drunk and started shouting at me during a feast. He accused me of forgetting my father, of becoming arrogant, of thinking I was a god. His words cut deeper than any blade, because they came from someone who had been loyal for so long. The room went silent. My hands shook, and before I could stop myself, I grabbed a spear and drove it straight through him. Clitus fell at my feet, blood pooling on the floor. The man who had once saved my life, dead by my own hand. I stumbled back, horrified, my mind spinning. I wanted to take it back, to undo it, but it was too late. Betrayal had twisted everything. Their betrayal of me, my betrayal of them, and worst of all, my betrayal of myself. That night, I wept like a child. Not because I had lost a soldier, because I had lost a friend, and because I saw clearly for the first time that the enemy wasn't just Persia. It was the darkness growing inside me. After Clitus's death, I felt like part of me had already broken. But there was no time to mourn. Darius was still out there, gathering his armies, preparing for one final stand. If I hesitated, all of Persia would rise against me again. So we marched. Weeks of dust, hunger, and silence. My men followed, but I could feel it. They weren't following out of love anymore. They were following out of fear. That stung more than any wound I'd ever taken. Then came Gaugamela. Darius had assembled everything he had left. War elephants, scythed chariots, thousands upon thousands of soldiers. It should have been impossible. Honestly, I thought it might be the end. But when the fighting began, something inside me ignited. I led the charge myself, straight through the Persian center. Steel clashed, horses screamed, and once again, I saw Darius. And once again he ran. The king of kings, the ruler of the world, fled before me a second time. His army crumbled. My men shouted my name, but all I could think was, this man has lost everything, and he knows it. But here's the twist I didn't expect. Darius never faced me again. Not because I killed him, because his own men betrayed him. One of his satraps, Bessus, turned on him, captured him, and left him bleeding in a cart, abandoned in the dust. When I finally found Darius, he was barely alive. His chest rose and fell weakly, his eyes glazed with pain. I knelt beside him, this man who had once commanded millions, and I promised him his family was safe. He took one last breath and was gone. I thought I'd feel triumph. Instead, I felt hollow. I hadn't conquered him. Betrayal had. And in that moment, I saw the truth. Betrayal doesn't just live in my camp or in my family. It poisons every empire. Even the greatest king in the world wasn't safe from the daggers of his own men. But with Darius dead, I wasn't just Alexander of Macedon anymore. I was king of Persia, and that terrified me more than any battle. After Darius, I had everything I ever wanted, or so it seemed. Persia was mine. Cities, gold, armies stretching as far as the eye could see. People called me Alexander the Great. But here's the thing, none of that filled the emptiness. The more power I gained, the less I trusted anyone. Every advisor, every soldier, every friend, I saw potential betrayal in their eyes. I started questioning every word, every glance. Loyalty became a rare, fragile thing, like a candle in the wind. And worst of all, I began to doubt myself. I wondered if I had lost the boy who tamed Bucephalus, the student who learned from Aristotle, the son who wanted his father's approval. I had killed friends, executed generals, and watched as entire armies died because of decisions I made. And every time I looked in the mirror, I asked myself, am I still human, or just a shadow of greatness? Some nights, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the palaces of Babylon, silent halls echoing under the weight of gold and empty promises. I saw faces of the men I had lost, Clitus, Parmenion, Philotas. I could hear their voices in the wind. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Power isn't freedom. Power is a chain. I tried to find solace in conquest, more cities, more lands, more glory. But the more I conquered, the more I felt trapped. Every victory came with betrayal. Every ally had an edge, and every decision carried a weight I couldn't put down. And then, in the midst of it all, I made a choice that would define the rest of my life. I decided to stop letting fear of betrayal control me. After years of blood, betrayal, and endless battles, I realized something. Ruling an empire isn't about fear, and it isn't about being unstoppable. It's about making choices that shape the future, even when those choices hurt. I began to change how I led. I still demanded loyalty, but I started to reward it too. I listened more, tried to understand my men, and acknowledge their fears. I realized that even the strongest king can only rule if people believe in him, not just fear him. I also started thinking about my own mistakes. Killing Clitus, executing Philotas, eliminating rivals. Those decisions haunted me. I couldn't undo them, but I could learn. I vowed to temper ambition with compassion, to think before I acted, and to remember that greatness isn't measured by how many enemies you destroy, but by how many lives you uplift. Even with all this, betrayal never fully disappeared. Some generals still whispered in the shadows, and some allies still plotted. But now, I could face it with a clearer mind. I understood that betrayal is part of life, and that sometimes the biggest betrayals come from ourselves, from the choices we make in anger, fear, or pride. I began to see the empire not just as a prize, but as a responsibility, and that changed everything. By now, I had conquered lands stretching from Greece to the edge of India. Cities bowed, rivers carried my banners, and my name was spoken with awe. Yet, with every victory, I felt the weight of what I had lost. Friends were gone. Men I loved and trusted, Clitus, Parmenion, Philotas, dead because of betrayal or my own hand. Families mourned, cities burned, and even the victories felt hollow. I had chased greatness, but I began to wonder, was it worth the cost? Hephaestion remained my closest friend, my anchor. Without him, I don't know if I could have survived the emptiness. He reminded me of what it meant to be human, to feel, to care. Every time I looked into his eyes, I remembered that my ambition shouldn't destroy those I loved. I also started thinking about my soldiers. Thousands had died following me across deserts and rivers. Thousands more would die if I kept pushing. I realized that leadership isn't just about conquest. It's about responsibility for every life under your command. And that responsibility can crush you if you ignore it. In the quiet moments, I finally allowed myself to grieve, not just for my enemies, but for the people I had lost and for the boy I once was. It was a bitter lesson. Greatness comes with a price, and betrayal, whether from others or ourselves, is often part of that price. Looking back, I realize now that ambition is a double-edged sword. It drives you forward, gives you purpose, and can make the impossible possible, but it also blinds you. It can make you see enemies where there are none and force you to betray even those you love to secure your goals. I've learned that betrayal isn't just about someone stabbing you in the back. It's about choices, pride, fear, and misunderstanding. Sometimes, the worst betrayals come from people who trusted you, and sometimes, the worst betrayal comes from yourself. I had both. I killed friends, I punished loyal men, and I let anger guide my hand. Each time, it cost me more than any battle ever could. If I could give advice to someone chasing greatness today, it would be this: trust wisely, but don't let fear control you. Reward loyalty and forgive mistakes when you can. And most importantly, remember that your ambition is not worth losing your humanity. Power without wisdom is destruction, and conquest without care is emptiness. I've seen the world from the peaks of mountains and the halls of kings. I've conquered lands no one thought I could. And yet, the thing I value most isn't gold or territory. It's understanding, reflection, and the ability to keep my soul intact in a world full of betrayal. So here I am, looking back on a life that most would call legendary. I conquered empires, faced kings, and commanded armies that stretched across the known world. And yet, the memories that stick with me most aren't of battles or gold. They're of betrayal, loss, and the weight of the choices I made. I learned that greatness isn't just about winning. It's about how you handle the betrayals that come your way, whether from enemies, friends, or even yourself. Every time I lost someone I trusted, every time I acted in anger, I felt the cost deeply. And every time I acted with wisdom, honor, or compassion, I felt a rare kind of victory that no battlefield could give. If there's one thing I'd want someone to take from my story, it's this: power and ambition are intoxicating, but they are nothing without reflection, responsibility, and integrity. Chase your dreams, yes, but never at the expense of who you are. Guard your friendships, your morals, and your heart, because no crown, army, or empire can replace them. In the end, I am Alexander the Great, not because I conquered Persia or defeated Darius, but because I survived, learned, and tried to turn even the betrayals and tragedies into lessons. And if you take anything from this, let it be this: life will betray you, people will disappoint you, but how you respond, that is where your true greatness lies. If you want, I can also rewrite the full story as a smooth, Level 2 English graded reading, perfect for learners who want to improve while reading about Alexander the Great. It would keep all the twists and emotional impact, but make the language simpler and easier to follow. Do you want me to do that?